Hello, everyone. Welcome to SUSE's first annual, maybe, virtual barbecue event. So as you guys can see, Big Moe is all ready to go. I do have a couple housekeeping things before I turn it over to him. First of all, there's a lot of people on the call right now. So obviously be on mute and turn off your camera. So, so the bandwidth doesn't become a problem. But we do encourage questions, both for the barbecue section and for the technical section a little bit later. So what I like to say is when you are ready to ask a question, unmute yourself and ask, or you can type in chat, and I or someone at SUSE will read it out loud to you, and we'll refer the question. But yeah, keep yourself on mute in case you're sneezing or something. So agenda-wise, we're going to start, obviously, with the barbecue section. That'll last about, say, 30 minutes. And then we will go into a little bit of our SAP story. SUSE will tell our side a little bit. And then our sponsor, co-sponsor, and partner, Lemongrass, who many of you know, are going to talk about their story when it comes to SAP. And it'll be a bit of just meaty goodness, both on the technical side and the barbecue side. So I think that's enough for the preamble. Let's get right to it. So to my left, or actually depending on where it shows on your screen, is of course Big Moe from Des Moines, Iowa. So I am a huge Food Network fan. So I know Moe from like a long time ago when I started watching Food Network, because he judges so many barbecue competitions. But for those of you that don't know Moe, maybe tell us a little bit yourself, like who you are and how did your barbecue journey start?
Yeah, so my name is Moe Cason. I'm from Des Moines, Iowa. I'm a big fan of barbecue. I come from a large family. My grandmother had 17 children. She was just an awesome woman. And so my mother had two jobs. She was a seamstress, so she was gone all day working, taking care of my sister and I, and so my grandmother watched my sister and I for a lot of part of my childhood growing up. And my grandmother, everything she made for me was from scratch. So my passion of cooking came from watching my grandmother and my mother cook in the kitchen. We were a tight-knit family, so we always had gatherings, cookouts, barbecues, and all that. But I was just fascinated with cooking on the grill. So, we had a 55-gallon drum back at home when I was coming up, and I used to just cook all kinds of hot dogs, the fish, to, pork steaks, whatever, and I was just fascinated by it. And then I went in the United States Navy. I was a boiler tech, managing fire again. And then one of the first things I bought when I got out of the Navy was a small, cheap barbecue grill I got from Walmart. So I start cooking in my backyard in my neighborhood. We had a guy down the street that did the same thing kind of, and that's pretty much what I was doing. And then I started watching, seeing all these barbecue shows on TV, and I was intrigued. I was like, this is really cool, because normally at that time, we just barbecued our neighborhood. But, all the pit masters and all that stuff was coming up. And I was fortunate enough to get on TV in 2010, won my episode, lost in the finale, and then ever since then I've just had great opportunities, and barbecue, as I said, been really, really good to me. I've been good to barbecue, so that's how that started. I mean, all my rubs and sauces are all my creations. I'm a self-taught cook, cooked a lot in my backyard, cooked a lot, obviously, in competitions. I've done probably over 300 since 2006, and I've competed pretty much all over the country except like Maine or Vermont. But in Washington, I haven't done that. I've done Oregon, but I haven't done Washington. But just love it. Just love it. Barbecue it now. It's a full-blown business for me. I have my sauces and rubs that are sold throughout the country. Ace, Academy, Hy-Vee. It's just been awesome. So, but what I'm going to talk to you guys today about is brisket. I've got a big 1,000-gallon pit out here that's cooking right now. I'm cooking a bunch of pork butts and briskets, actually for my sister's work. And so I'm going to talk to you about how to do really good brisket. When I teach classes all over the country, a lot of people have a lot of questions about brisket. They're intimidated by it. They think it's too hard to cook and it's expensive and they don't want to ruin it. So I'm going to give you some great tips that you can execute no matter where you're at and make great brisket. And depending on what you're cooking on too. So what you're looking at here is what you call a full packer brisket. Now, a full packer brisket means there's the flat section of this brisket and there's the point. And as you can see here, this has been on the pit for maybe 6 hours. It's about 160 degrees. And I'm going to take this brisket to about 203 degrees. Brisket, if you didn't know, is the chest muscle on that cow. And they use this particular muscle, they got two of them, to get up and off the ground. So a brisket is actually one of the toughest meats on that whole cow. But if you do some low and slow on it, slowly render out the fat, break the collagens down, the tissues, it absolutely is wonderful. This and beef short ribs are probably my favorite cut on the cow over steak, because I'm just a big fan of brisket and beef short ribs, things of that nature. So this is about a 13-pound prime brisket. I just got this at the box store. Actually, it was Sam's Club I got them at. And as I said again, there's two sections of this brisket. There is the flat and there's the point. Now, you may at a grocery store be able to just find the flat. The flat's always going to be more expensive because they're going to charge you for separating that. But because I do competitions and I love the point section of this brisket is my favorite cut on the brisket. It's when you heard the term burn ends, that's what that comes from. You do not make burn ends out of the flat. You make it out of the point. The point is the bottom section of this full packer brisket. Now, there's going to be a fat seam that joins these two together, okay? And what we do for competitions is actually we cook, and then towards the end, we'll separate the point from the flat. And then we'll add a little more rub back on that point, and we'll put it back on the pit, and we'll get that rendered out to where it's just like butter. And then you cut them up to about 1-inch cubes, sauce them up if you're going to, and it's just nothing but just gold. And for competition guys like me, that can be the difference between getting first place or getting 18th place. As long as your slices are really good, and if your point is really, really good, now you're in the game and you have a good opportunity to win. If you just turn slices in, that's fine too. But for your backyard warriors, I would just cook the whole the whole point, the whole packer and everything, because the point has so much fat and collagens, it actually lends itself to the bottom side of that flat. If you cook just a flat by itself, it can still be great, but it doesn't have the fat content like the point does. And there's a whole lot of goodness that helps that flat during the cooking process. So I'm just going to dissect this brisket. Normally this is about 160 degrees. So actually, this is the time I actually will wrap a brisket. I'm going to go through my wrap process, which is something that I created being out on the competition circuit. So, but I just want to show you what that looks like.
That brings up a question, Mo. So you were talking about judging between the difference between being first and 18th. It literally does all come down to the taste, right? I mean, is that the only criteria?
Yes, it's taste and it's texture and its appearance. When you slice and put that slices of meat into the box, that box should be stunning. Meaning that, and I'm going to give you some tips on how to cook this brisket. When a judge opens up my clamshell, and that's the little 9x9 white clamshells that you see that we put our meat in, you want them to look at that meat and be like, I'm ready to get into that and eat that meat. You want it to look just beautiful. So you eat with your eyes first. If you don't take the time to process that meat once it's cooked and just throw it in a box, you're telling that judge that you didn't really care, or you are inexperienced and don't know how to place meat in the box. And that's purely a competition thing. But even if you're cooking for your backyard friends and family, you still want to be able to present that brisket to where it's just wonderful. So this is the actual point. Now you're going to see a little piece of the meat here and some fat here, but all that would render out. Now I look for a brisket that's got a large point. This is the point. Depending on how they cut it off the carcass, I'm looking for a big piece of point. Because once I render it out, I'm trying to get 6 to 8 cubes. That's all I need to be able to turn into the boxes to the judge. Because there's 6 judges. So each judge is going to take a piece. So you want to make sure you have enough in the box so they all can get some. You don't want to turn 6 slices of brisket in and then put in 3 burnt ends. Well, that's going to hurt your score, because now you got 3 judges that don't have burnt ends, and watching the other judges enjoy these burnt ends. So make sure, if you're going to do that, make sure you get a big point, and you just have to look at them in the case. You'll see them. Now, when I go, and I kind of jumping ahead of myself, but once I find that I'm going to cook a brisket, I go to the, say, Sam's Club or Costco, and what I do is I'll ask the butcher to bring out the case that this brisket came in. And on the case, there's a sticker on it. It's a kill date. And then I actually, for me, to make it even better, is I wet age this even more. So I'll have a refrigerator, a commercial refrigerator out in the garage. It's dedicated just to briskets. And what that is when I age a brisket, I'll add another 40 days to that brisket. So I'll look at the kill date, and I'll take a Sharpie, and I'll add 40 days to that, and then that's the date I'll put on this brisket. Now I put it in a commercial refrigerator or a refrigerator that you got in the garage that your kids and everybody's not going in and out. Because what happens with a residential type refrigerator, it doesn't have the recovery time like a commercial refrigerator does, like you see in a restaurant or a bar. So you want something to be that you can hold 35 degrees consistently, and if you open the door, it recovers quickly. Because what you're doing is you're bringing that temperature down to almost just above freezing, and you're allowing you to be able to age this brisket. Why age a brisket? When you age your brisket or age beef, period, what's going to happen is it's starting to break down. The tissues are starting to get soft, and you're actually catching it before it goes bad. It's going to give you a little bit more flavor, and also when you age it, it breaks the tissues down, and it makes it a little bit more tender brisket. So I'll do that for all my brisket, and when I do that, once it reaches its 40 days, I've got another big chest freezer out, and I just go ahead and transfer that brisket, and I put it in the freezer. And I've got a freezer stacked full of briskets that are already aged and frozen. So when I go do competitions, or if I'm cooking for somebody, I can just go out in the freezer and grab me a frozen brisket that's already been aged, and it's ready to go. You can still cook the brisket just like what you get from Sam's Club or Costco, but I'm going to tell you, if you put 30 to 40 days extra on that brisket, leave it in the cryovac pack, it's going to be a better brisket, period. I mean, that's just a fact. Okay? So once you do that.
When you say 40 days, is it 40 days from the kill date or 40 days from the day you buy it?
Hey, 4 days from the kill date.
From the kill date.
Ask the butcher to bring the case out, 'cause it's going to show you that date on there. And you add 40 days to that.
And somebody just asked on chat, can you explain the difference between wet aging versus dry aging?
Yeah, wet aging is when you go to the store and you see a brisket that's already shrunk wrapped in a thick cryovac bag. That is wet aging, if you're going to age it at all. Dry aging is a completely different process. It has to do with humidity, temperature, and basically what they're doing is they got this perfect set of temperature and humidity. And the meat is outside of the package, and they got them on just racks. And they actually will grow like a nut fungus mold, that's what I want to use, on the exterior of that brisket. And they'll age it out 40 days, if not longer than that. And it doesn't look appealing, but it's doing the same thing. You're controlling it, and you're keeping it in a state to where it's not going bad. It is, in a way, it's trending that direction, but you're catching it before you do. Dry aging will give you a completely different flavor. It's even a more stronger, I wouldn't say gamey flavor, but it's a deeper, richer beef flavor. But it could be on the sense, if you've never had it before, a little bit, I want to say gamey. I know that's kind of a wrong word to use, but it is, because that brisket is actually being aged and being taken to the point where it's almost bad. And then what they do with the dry aging is they'll cut all of that mold off the exterior of that brisket or that beef or that steak or whatever, and now you can slice it up, steaks or whatever you're going to do. So, but I like wet aging because, I mean, I don't have a dry aging machine or a room. They sell them online. You can buy them, and they're neat. Don't get me wrong. But with wet aging, it's already in the cryovac pack. Take a Sharpie, add your date on there, and put it in your refrigerator, age it, and then put it in the freezer. And then when you take it out, it's all ready to go. All you need to do is season it up, and voila. So you got your brisket that you aged. You're ready to go. You're ready to season it. And I'm gonna give you some tips. I don't season any of my proteins until an hour before going on the pit. Now I don't know how many of you guys, and I know you've done it because I did it coming up. How many people season their meat the night before, thinking that it's going to make it better? Well, it doesn't. One of the main components in a rub is salt. So if you got a big Ziploc bag and you put your ribs in, or you put your brisket in or whatever, and you season it up a night before, what's the first thing you're going to see when you open up that bag in the morning? You're going to see a pool of liquid. That is valuable liquid that's supposed to be inside the piece of meat, not outside. Okay? Because salt does what? It'll pull moisture out of that meat. All you need is an hour.
Where's the barbecue thing? I never got a package for it.
Huh?
I'll help you track your package. Just email Helen, and then we'll figure it out. So back to Mo.
Yeah. So season it up an hour before putting it on the pit. So like I'll have my pit set up at 300 degrees. Whatever you're going to do next one. I don't put any rub on this brisket until about an hour before. Then I'm going to put it in the pit. Okay, and that's enough time for the rub to kind of get wet and the moisture will kind of bleed through a little bit and set up, and then she's ready to go and ready to put on the pit. And when you do something like an hour, it gives it enough time to get some of that coolness out from the refrigerator and let it warm up a little bit. The pores open up, it gets a little more pliable and looser, and that's a nice thing. And it helps you on the cook because it doesn't have to scrub that cold away, a little longer. It'll take less time. So you got your brisket. Now, the couple things I do is when I season up, when I'm at that stage, when I'm getting ready to season my brisket up, I use canola oil. You can use EVO. Some people use mustard. I'm a big fan of canola oil. I got duck fat spray that I also use for competition. And what this is a binder. This allows this rub to adhere nicely to the meat. And it's oil, so it's a lubricant. It's going to keep that surface nice and moist throughout the cook. Now, I'll have a couple cans of these for like I'm doing the whole cook. I've been cooking since 8 o'clock this morning. And I'll go out every couple hours and I will spray all the meat down with oil. Because that's nothing but a beautiful thing for the bark to set up, and it just keeps the surface of that meat moist, okay? Because what's happening in the cooking process is the juices are inside, deep, obviously inside the brisket. And as you're putting heat to this, the juices are going to try to work their way out to the surface of the meat. That's why when you put a piece of meat on, especially you put it over direct flame, you come back in 10, 15 minutes, it's the outside is wet because some juices are working their way out. Now with brisket and with a lot of beef period, steaks or whatever, the key thing is once you reach your temperature, internal done temperature, that'll be 203 degrees. That's kind of my norm for my pork butts, my ribs, my brisket, even my chicken, and my dark meat on my chicken. So I put this on the pit. Now, depending on what temperature you're cooking at, okay, this brisket is going to take anywhere between 9 to 13 hours to cook. Now, remember this. The hotter and faster you cook something, especially this brisket, the higher the internal done temperature is going to take to be done. Now, I'm just using that off a base of choice grade or prime grade. As you get into Wagyu, which I cook that on the regular, you might need to go up a little higher because the fat content is so incredible in those briskets, they can actually fool you because you slide the thermometer in a pocket of fat, it's going to give you a higher reading than actual what the temperature of the muscle fiber is doing. But 203 is a great number. So you got your brisket on the pit. Once it gets to between 160 and 170 internal temperature, get yourself a remote thermometer, stick it in the center of this piece of meat, and monitor. And as it's pacing up and gets to about 160, 170 degrees, depending on your pit, you're going to need a wrap. Like when I got a big 1,000-gallon offset pit I'm looking at right now, that's my big pit, I'm going to have to wrap these briskets, okay? Because what you want to do is you want to stop the smoke process because I'm feeding sticks every 30 minutes on my pit, okay? Just throwing sticks every 30 minutes, throwing pecan and posto, and you need to stop that process. Now, I've got a pellet cooker here. There's a lot of times I cook brisket and I don't need a wrap. Because the good thing about pellet cooker is, one of the many things about them, they'll never over smoke. The way the computer software is set up in there, they have smoke cycles and they do a great job. But when you start running into offset stick burners, you need to stop that process. Because if you don't, first of all, you're going to put too much color on that piece of meat, and you want to preserve that beautiful mahogany color, and you're going to probably put too much smoke on that meat. Now, my pit's designed really well. It's out of Ruling, Texas. I'm looking at it, I got a clear stack. That's what you want. You don't want your stack chugging full of smoke. When I put a stick in there, there'll be a whiff of smoke for a couple minutes, and then it's gone. Because I got perfect air-fuel ratio. It's burning clean. And I'll get into that in a little bit later on about, making a clean fire, because that makes a big difference too. You never want to use green wood, wet wood. Someone gives you a free oak tree that's trimmed up and everything, they just cut it down. You want to let it sit for 4 to 6 months out in the sun and you want all that moisture to try to come out of that piece of wood. Because when you throw a stick of wood in a pit, you want it to catch fire immediately. If the wood is still green, that means it still has a lot of moisture in it. It's going to smolder. It's not going to catch fire as easily. What does that do? That's an incomplete burn cycle. That bad smoke is now what? Traveling across your meat and adhering to your piece of meat. And everybody's, I'm sure they've experienced it, where you have someone's barbecue and it's over smoked. Well, there's a lot of reasons for that, but one of the reasons could be that they've been using green wood. Another one is they don't have a pit that's designed well and it doesn't flow nice. When you got a pit that flows nice, once you get it up to temperature and you look at the stack should be transparent. You may have a little wisp of gray, minute wisp of gray, but generally, I'm looking at my stack out there. She's running at 275 degrees, and the stack is clear. That's what you want. That means that wood that's in that pit is burning correctly. Okay? So you get to 160, 170, you wrap it. Now, this is a process that I did back in the day, because back when I started doing competitions, everybody uses foil. They wrapped everything in foil. But the downside of that is, when you wrap a piece of meat completely in foil, it starts to steam because the moisture has nowhere to go. And now that beautiful bark that you're working on now just sloughs off after you get done cooking. It's gross. You're working against what you've been trying to achieve cooking your 8-10 hours of cooking. So as I start competing down in Texas, I start going into these barbecue restaurants, and I start seeing these cats taking briskets out in butcher paper. And the light came on, and I realized why they were doing it. So the great thing about butcher paper is it acts like foil, but it's porous. But it has really small, tiny pores. So it allows the moisture to pass through so you don't lose your bark. That bark is the beautiful thing. That's what you're working on, achieving on, cooking the meat correctly, and you want to have a beautiful bark. If you wrap it completely in foil, you've turned the exterior of that bark into mush because the moisture has nowhere to go. It hits the top of the foil, just comes back down as steam and water, and it just ruins the exterior. Then you got to open up the foil, allow it to breathe out and everything, and you don't want to do that. So one of the things I did coming up as competitions and stuff, I wanted to get away with wrapping completely in foil. Okay, so I take 2 sheets of foil, try to get heavy duty foil, and what I do is I'll take, once my brisket gets to about a 160, 170, I'll take this brisket and I'll put 2 sheets of foil down like this. Next thing I do is I take butcher paper,
So while you're wrapping that, Mo, we have a couple questions from the audience.
Yep.
The first question is, where on the grill would you want us to put the meat? Say I have a 4-burner pit. Where do I put it? And also, when do you place your meat?
If you're using an offset stick burner, obviously you got one side that's hot and one side that's cooler. Okay? So you want to place the thickest part. So it's the point where you see the thickest part of this brisket. You want that facing towards the heat source. Now, these are Kamados right here. They're like green eggs, Kamados. They've got heat that goes all the way around when you use a place setter, which is a deflector that keeps the flame from hitting directly on the meat. It doesn't matter on these because the heat's coming all the way around. On this pellet cooker, it's the same way. Now, there's a little variance on this GMG, whereas the left side is just slightly cooler than the right side, but it doesn't make much difference. But when you're running like an offset stick burner, reverse flow stick burner, you want the thickest part of the meat facing towards the heat source. Okay. Now, depending on your pit, because there's all types of pits out there, do not place it right over where the heat's coming out because you're going to scorch it. Okay. So give some distance, depending on how your pit works, and just place your meat and have the thickest part facing towards the heat source. Okay. So you can see here, I got it wrapped. I got 2 sheets of foil, butcher paper. Now I put this back on the pit. I put a probe in the center. Now I'm going to take this to 203 degrees. I'll have my little thing set up to where it chimes at 203 degrees. I'll go out and take my thermal pin. This is another thing I want you guys to do. Well, I got it with me right now, but it's a thermometer. Get a thermometer. Mine's a thermal pin. And once you stick it into the meat at 203, it should be like a knife through hot butter. Okay? But you don't want to forget about it. because when you get close to 200 degrees internal temperature on the brisket, that's when those collagens really start to break down, and that's when that meat starts to get soft. And this is where people get discouraged when cooking a brisket because they're afraid of it. And one of the many mistakes newcomers do when they cook a brisket is they undercook it. So they're taking their briskets off at 185, 190, thinking it's done, and it's not. It doesn't start transforming to goodness until you get close to 200 degrees. And 203 is the number I've settled on that it works across the board on a lot of my meats. So once you get to 203, you stick your needle in, your probe, and you move it up and down. It should have no resistance whatsoever. If it's hard pushing in and out, it's not done. Okay, you need to leave it on there. But you do not want this brisket tracking up to 208, 207, especially when you got something like a prime or a choice, because you actually overcook the brisket. And that's when you get to the point to where you cook all the collagens out of the meat, and now you're going to have chopped brisket because you won't be able to make slices out of it. Then it's going to start going dry on you. So 203 is a great number. You can start checking at 200 degrees, but 201, 202, you start checking. And once the brisket gets to 203 degrees and it feels great, the biggest thing that you can do with brisket is let it rest. Because remember I talked earlier about during the cooking process, the juices are working from the center all the way out to the surface. But in the rest mode, those juices will try to redistribute and equalize in that piece of meat. And that's what makes brisket, that's the icing on the cake. Is you take this brisket and you have a dry cooler, and you take it, put a blanket in the bottom of the cooler and take the brisket. Do not take it out of the wrap. Leave it just like this. Take it in and place it in a cooler, close the lid, and walk away for about 3 hours. And let that magic happen. And those juices will start to try to redistribute in that brisket, and it will just be really nice. Because what happens is, if you get to 203, okay, and you take that brisket off and you go on the cutting board and you start slicing and you see all the juices running out and everybody's going, ooh, that's really cool. That's not cool, okay? Because if you let that brisket rest, all of those juices will still be in that brisket. You'll have a little juice, but not like it's running out, okay? It may look cool, but that's a bad thing, because what happens is when you let it rest, as I said, those juices will try to equalize in that brisket. Now, when you slice your brisket, the face of the brisket slices are juicy, okay? Your burn ends are juicy. You can just take them and squeeze them and you see the juice. That's because you let that brisket rest, okay?
So Mo, we have about 4 minutes left to the barbecue portion of today's session. So let's wrap up the demo and get to some customer questions.
Okay.
So one guy has asked, do you have any tips on cooking chicken? How do I make the skin crispy as opposed to rubbery?
Yes, okay. I've cooked a ton of chicken in my days, obviously competition and for backyard. There's a couple steps, couple ways of getting crispy chicken. One is cooking it at high heat. But the bad side of that is that you overcook the chicken meat in order to achieve crispy skin. Two is what I do is I get a tenderizer. There's a brand name called Jacquard. It has needles. You perforate the skin with a tenderizer. What that does is it creates the surface of the skin like a postage stamp. Because there's nothing worse when a judge picks up your piece of chicken thigh or leg and they bite and the skin comes off and flaps down and hanging out of their mouth. You can hang it up by getting any awards on that, because that's not going to happen. But if you tenderize that skin with a tenderizer, some are needle pins, some are blades, you don't have to get crazy about it, but kind of work that chicken skin and you'll see the little perforated holes. That is how you can really get bite through skin. It allows the excess fat from underneath the skin to work their way out. But then when that person picks up that piece of chicken, they bite it, it bites clean like biting in a piece of chocolate cake. Now, when it comes to temperature, you know, when I'm cooking breast meat, I don't go past 155. If you're cooking dark meat, I go 185, 190, sometimes 200 degrees, especially with my wings. I do 200 degrees with my wings. But thighs and legs, I go about 185, 190. It's technically done at 168, the dark meat, but what happens is at that temperature, that texture to me, it's not right. It'll still have more of a gelatinous feel in your mouth. I mean, it's going to be at its juiciest, but if you take it up to about 185, 190, you're going to have a better experience eating that chicken. Another way of getting bite through skin is if you've seen any videos where people were scraping skins, which is torturous, trying to scrape 16 chicken thighs and pulling the skin off skin. I've done it, I don't like doing it. Another one is called the butter bath method. And the butter bath method is you take a 9x9 aluminum half pan, you take 9 thighs, trim them up, and you put a stick and a half of butter cubed up in there. Now, obviously, your chicken's all seasoned up, and you take a stick and a half of butter, cube it up, and just put it in the pan. Set your pit at 250 degrees. This is going to be a 2-hour process. You take your chicken thighs, and they're all touching each other, and they're seasoned all the way around, and you got your little chunks of butter in there. You put it on the pit at 250 degrees pit temperature, and you cook it, cover it up for 1 hour. And what that does, that butter melts, and then by that 1.5 sticks of butter in a 9x9 clamshell with 9 thighs in there, the butter will come up right at the half mark of those chicken thighs. What does that do? That basically poaches the skin. That makes that skin bite through. So 1 hour wrap, and then you take that off, take the foil off, okay, and you do another hour with the foil off. Now, what's going to happen is you're going to take that chicken out, it's going to look anemic, because the rub is going to be washed away by the butter. So what the trick is, guys will take their pit, like a green egg or a Weber, and you season your meat up again, and you put a chunk of cherry. If you did not know, cherry adds color to stuff. So if you got a piece of chicken that looks anemic, it doesn't have that great golden color, put a small 2 chunks of cherry on your pit, and then put your chicken back on there. That'll give color back on that chicken, and then you're going to have bite through skin because being poached by the butter.
Thank you so much, Mo. That was great advice. Unfortunately, our time is up. So can you give us, we're all home cooks, right? One parting advice on what is the one thing we can all do at home to up our barbecue game?
Plan your work your plan. That's so important. You got friends coming over your house on a Saturday afternoon for a cook, and you want to cook pork butt or you want to cook ribs. Make sure you calculate your whole time and back your time is up. So if it takes you 5 hours and 4 hours to do ribs, calculate your trimming, your seasoning, you get your pit, calculate all of that so that when it comes to that time, you got a party at 3 o'clock, your ribs should be done at 2 o'clock. You shouldn't have to be chasing your stuff at the end, because now people are standing around wondering, when's the food going to be done? So plan your work. Sit back. If you know your pit, learn your pit too. It's another one. Learn your pit. I don't care if you got a Weber. I don't care if you got a $20,000 pit like I got outside. Learn your pit, because you can cook great barbecue on anything. Learn it, master it, know when to cook when it's 20 degrees outside and when it's 90 degrees outside. Once you master your pit and know how to work and make the adjustments, that's going to make your life a lot easier when you're cooking your proteins.
Thank you so much, Mo. And for those of you that don't know, Mo's actually got a new show coming. So he's going to be coming to National Geographic. So there's going to be a big announcement. You all heard it first here. And just watch for him coming to the small screen in your own living room. Thanks a lot, Mo.
All right, bye-bye.
Bye-bye. All right, time to switch gears. We are going to talk about another meaty topic, SAP. So as sort of a palate cleanser, let's do a quick survey over chat. All of you guys are involved with SAP and especially SAP deployments in the cloud. So just put in chat, I guess, what percentage of your SAP landscape in your organization is already in the cloud? It could be 0%, could be 100%, any number. So it's a 2-part question. So that was part 1. Part 2 is, are you multi-cloud or do you have a preferred cloud vendor? If so, which one is it? So you could say multi, you could say AWS or any of the other clouds. Okay, I see some answers. 10% in the cloud, 5% hybrid, multi. I see GCP, single vendor. I see a couple multis. Great. So that is kind of whetting our appetite for the SAP topic. So let me get right into it. SUSE just released a little book that I call The Ultimate Guide for Migration to SAP. So I'm going to share my desktop and walk you guys through the highlights of it. And if you actually want a copy of this PDF guide, just email me. You all have my emails. So sorry, I'm going to have to hit this a little bit so I can get into slideshow mode. Okay. So let's talk about best practices for a worry-free cloud migration. So you guys all know SUSE because we invited you, so hopefully you know us quite well. But for those of you that may not fully know our reputation, we actually are the dominant player when it comes to SAP. We are the jungle lion, we're the 800-pound gorilla, whatever you call it, because we have over 90, well, okay, 85, 88. So it depends on which day you see the survey. Between 85 to 90% market share. We are the number one Linux for SAP with 30,000 customers worldwide. And a lot of them have migrated or are moving to the cloud. So what is the best practice? I'm using the movie metaphor here. It's one of my favorite movies, obviously Lord of the Rings. Best practice number one is you need a trusted guide, right? Because Frodo here had Sam, and that's who you need, somebody you can trust and can give you their honest assessment of how things are going. So how do you choose the right partner? So these are the 5 criteria we recommend. Obviously, they need demonstrated technical proficiency. So that you can look at the AWS website. You can see that which consulting partners are certified for SAP with the right competencies. You can ask them and talk to their customers about their experience, what kind of tools, special methods they use, what is their special differentiation, right? What's their special sauce that they think make them better than everybody else? Culture fit's actually really important. Sometimes one of the really large consulting companies may or may not be the right fit for what your organization needs. So a smaller partner, say like Lemongrass, who really specialized in moving SAP to, say, AWS, could be a better culture fit because you will usually know that the people they put on your project will be the people that are there to pitch you on the project in the first place. And then, of course, SAP has a lot of vertical extensions. So having the right industry expertise is important if you're in one of those industries. And, of course, cost. But interestingly, we talked to hundreds of customers who migrated to the cloud. And many of them, cost did not end up being like the most important consideration. A lot of them we've heard ended up contracting with not the cheapest vendor, because of these 4 other reasons that I listed here. So that's best practice number 1, choose the right partner. Best practice number 2, moving to the cloud, is you need to engage SUSE early. We are kind of the wizard in this situation. Oftentimes people think, well, the OS, it's kind of an afterthought. We don't need to worry about it until like last minute. However, there are 3 really good reasons to talk to SUSE early. Number 1 is, even though the cloud is really flexible, there are such things that we call one-way doors, basically consumption models. You can lock yourself in. There are a lot of different ways you can pay for, say, AWS, right? There's pay-as-you-go, bring your own subscription, reserve instances, convertible RIs, EC2 savings plan. There's just a lot of different options. It's possible if you choose the wrong option, you're stuck and you have to physically do everything over, basically redo the migration if you wanted to move to a different option. Because we deal with this sort of thing a lot, we have pretty good advice on, what's the right consumption option for you. So it really doesn't hurt to talk to SUSE early about this. Reason number 2 is sanity checks, right? We have a lot of best practices that over our 20 years partnership with SAP we've developed. So having us do a sanity check and say, yep, you're all green, you're following the best practices, that ensures you don't have a problem last minute, because we get called a lot at the 11th hour and say, hey, this is not working as planned. Now we're jeopardizing this big migration window. So don't get there. Plan early, talk to SUSE. We'll come on site. We obviously have consulting services, professional services that runs you through just a quick sanity check for deployment and SAP tips and tricks. And then day 2 operations is actually SUSE's specialty. I can honestly say probably nobody knows more about the updates and patching that happens in cloud infrastructures when it comes to the SAP environment than SUSE does. We do this a lot. We have automated deployments. We have tooling. Just talk to us, and then you can figure out the best ways to extend all the existing AWS capabilities. Best practice number 3 is HA. So obviously, it's very mission critical, SAP is. So you want high availability, but HA is so complicated. Okay, look at this chart. These are just 4 of the most common ways to set up high availability for HANA system replication. It's very complicated. There are a lot of different variables, configurations, and what worked for you in your own data center. If you just move the exact same parameters to the cloud, usually it doesn't work. So SUSE can help you tune that. So don't go it alone. It's just way too complex. It's very specialized knowledge. And we're here to help. We'd be happy to help with all of this. Best practice number 4 is use everything in your arsenal, right? You see swords, bows, everything here. Basically, automation is the way to go. You don't want to rely on manual implementation, manual patching, configuration management, all of that. You don't really want to rely on any of that because humans make mistakes. You want to automate as much as possible. In order to move to SAP HANA faster and really reduce the amount of time you spend on the project, you want to have a full automation plan ahead of time. And obviously, SUSE can help you create that together based on your unique processes, based on the applications that you have. So with our working together, we can give you a complete migration and automation plan that help you provision your cloud environment, help you configure SUSE Linux Enterprise Server for SAP, help you deploy your SAP landscape, all of it using this tool set that combines SaltStack, Terraform, SUSE Manager, just all of the above. And best practice number 4 is don't wait for go live, then start thinking about, okay, day 2, what am I doing? How do I make sure everything is set up properly? You want to start thinking about day 2 operations, optimizing it on a continual basis long before that. And that really combines things like patching, security management, monitoring, alerting, and just all of that. So there's a lot of detailed knowledge that SUSE has that we'd be happy to discuss with you and create a unique tailored plan just for you. So don't wait for day 2 operations. Start early in your migration cycle before you get there. To summarize the SUSE portion of your SAP conversation, obviously AWS has the longest track record of success when it comes to SAP, right? They are still the biggest public cloud. They have a lot of extensive APIs and extensions within their platform to support analytics. And they support some of the world's most demanding workloads still today with a lot less downtime than their competition. If you compare that to SUSE, we have about 10 years of experience on AWS, which is a very long time. Look at any other Linux vendor. It's a lot less. And then we've been 20 years, as I said earlier, as an SAP partner. So together, the 3 company really has a lot of combined expertise. We send people to Waldorf, and then there's a lot of joint R&D that happens, and we have support engineers that are basically on hotlines to each other. It's a very cohesive process across the 3 companies when it comes to supporting customers, giving them the best experience possible. And then a lot of those features that I talked about earlier, HA, automation, monitoring, dashboards, live patching. Live patching is a big deal for SAP because you know how HANA databases are huge. And we've heard customers that because they had to patch, they had to bring down HANA and bring it back up again, the size of it sometimes leads it to take days. So that's obviously not acceptable. But for most patches, the live patching can last you literally 2 years. So you don't actually have to bring down your system for most of the patching that happens. So that's really, really valuable. And then, of course, we have all, just Olympics just wrapped, bro. We have almost all of the worldwide records when it comes to benchmarks about performance on any kind of hardware platform in the cloud. So you can look all that up on SAP's website. In summary, we think we're a really winning combination. So if you're considering migrating SAP to the cloud, consider the combination of AWS plus SUSE, of course, plus SAP. That's my little portion. Do we have any questions before I turn it over to the Lemongrass team? No? Okay. So I am very happy and privileged to introduce Eamon O'Neill from Lemongrass, as well as Joe Melton. Eamon is actually the North America founder of Lemongrass, And then Joe, if you bring yourself on camera and unmute yourself, Joe, wherever you are, is the customer success manager for Lemongrass. So I will get off video now and turn it right over to Lemongrass to continue the show.
Thank you, Helen. I want to say thanks, obviously, to Moe for a great session. That was really enjoyable. It certainly puts me to shame when I see people that good at their task. And I just thought I'd introduce myself first. So my name is Eamon O'Neill. I'm, as Helen said, the founder of Lemongrass and the Chief Customer Officer based out of Boston. And for those who don't know Lemongrass, we've been a partner of AWS since 2010. So we were one of the first in the world to work with AWS on getting SAP running on the cloud. And what we do is effectively we help customers like yourselves get their SAP workloads onto cloud. And we help them post-migration run a managed service. And of course, once on AWS, and typically, as Helen's mentioned, typically people run SUSE as the OS for that. What we try to help them do is get the outcomes that people expect to see. So once they get the cloud, they're looking for availability, performance, cost reduction, security, etc. So that's kind of what we do in a nutshell. I've also got my colleague, Joe Melton, with me. Joe, do you want to introduce yourself?
Sure. Hi, everyone. It's great to be with you all today. And again, Moe did a fantastic job. Learned a lot, and it shows the power of experience and technique, right, Eamon? My name is Joe Melton, as Eamon mentioned. I'm a customer success manager at Lemongrass. I've been here for 2.5, almost 3 years, I guess. Come from a long line of basis experience and SAP experience doing technical work. As Eamon was mentioned before too, using AWS and SUSE is one of the main things we've been working on in the recent past. And my job has been to make sure that those migrations or implementations were well prepared for, executed, as they were supposed to be, and that the clients can get the maximum benefit out of those kinds of things. So,
Hey Joe, sorry, can you turn on your video? I don't know if you forgot.
My video shows it's on.
Oh, that's so weird because we don't see it. Maybe you turn it on and off, toggle it one more time.
So we can see you now. Maybe keep it off, Joe.
Okay, it's off on my side, but can you see me now?
We can see you, but can you toggle it back on? See if it worked this time.
Yep.
Aha! There we go. Okay, sorry.
Hey.
Back to you.
All right. So that's kind of the history of Joe in a nutshell there. It's great to be with everyone today, and I'm glad to be here. So as we get into this, Eamon, I think I'd like to ask a little bit of a question for you. So we talked about barbecue, and we obviously looked at it from Des Moines, Iowa, and I grew up in Tennessee, so I've got the southern perspective. But how was barbecuing in Ireland?
Well, yeah, I've got to confess, as an Irish guy, I'm in awe what you guys in America do with barbecues. So my memories of barbecuing back in Ireland, very simply, starting by standing in the rain most of the time. You probably know it's a very wet country. And basically we had two choices of meat, burgers or sausages, and that was it. So nothing like these briskets and tomahawk steaks that I see on the barbecues here. But the upside, of course, was, we could always make up for that with some good Guinness. So I think we had as much fun at barbecues as anybody else does. But Joe, you're in a place where you guys take the science of barbecuing a lot more seriously. So what's your experience with barbecuing?
Yeah, I grew up in West Tennessee, just north of Memphis. It's taken pretty seriously where I come from. I can't say that I'm a pit master or an expert anywhere near Moe, but we do take it quite seriously. One of the interesting things today is hearing, about his preparation and his, how he, all the techniques that he had noted. It's definitely something that, everyone where I grew up had a secret sauce, a secret rub, or a way that they did things. And there would be competitions where they'd roll out to the local baseball field and have a setup of different smokers and cookers and things like that. So it's definitely something that we grew up with, and switched to mainly a pescatarian and vegetarian now. So I risked getting disowned by my family there, but they seem to still care about me, so it still works out nicely.
Cool. Well, I think I think one of the things I noticed from today as well, and I really love the phrase "plan your work, work your plan," and that, of course, in our job is exactly what you bang on about at work all the time, is there's a couple of key things that are parallels here, of course. First off, the preparation. You could see straight off, Joe had all his gear ready. He had the ingredients ready. And, without trying to stretch the analogy too hard, of course, but the same is absolutely true with what we do. We've got, I think the good news for people who haven't moved to cloud yet is a lot of the hard work's already been done in terms of design, in terms of patterns, in terms of knowing what it needs to look like. SUSE has released a whole bunch of accelerators that allow you to deploy faster on AWS, as of AWS, and as of we've worked together with both companies to come up with cookie cutter solutions for how you can get to cloud quickly. You also mentioned you work the plan, and I guess we see exactly the same thing, is that, there's a number of different ways, a number of different meals that Moe would make. There's a number of different outcomes that Joe would make. And each of those is a slightly different recipe. Sorry, Joe, I know it's an easy one, but we get recipes for any source platform, no matter what the source, HPUX, AIX, Windows, any other Linux, onto AWS and any type of combination for any product version. Again, that takes a while to get in there, but once you've got that, you know your plan, you know what you need to execute against. But I also think that it's probably true to say that the difference, while of course in cooking and cleanup is really important, the post-meal situation, for us, the post-go live is actually critical. And that's where you really start getting the outcomes or not of what you're trying to get. So that's the hard work. And we see that with some of our current customers, that it's only after go live you start to really tune things, you get the performance right, cost optimization being a key one, security improvements as an ongoing challenge. So I hope I haven't really stretched that analogy too far, but I do see a lot of parallels between the professionalism that Moe demonstrated and what we try to do every day. So Joe, what about your tip? What tip today did you enjoy the most?
So a couple notes, and some of this came from Moe and some from what Helen just stated as well. Moe started with a grill from Walmart. He didn't start with expert knowledge and immediately become who he is today. He started by starting, by growing, by not being afraid to try things, and that's the beauty of some of what the cloud offers. Is you can get in, you can do POCs, you can practice, you can create your secret sauce over time. You don't have to dive in with all of the best equipment. You're not sinking a bunch of capital in to try to do this. You're learning as you go. I saw a couple people posted that they had 0% in the cloud or 5% in the cloud. That's a great place to start. It's a good time to get going, and the first step is always the most critical one. After that, you build on it. Another thing Moe said that I thought was interesting was that some of the toughest cuts, the ones that people are afraid of, can be the most valuable. And what it takes is a little bit of knowledge and a good mentor. And if you have those two things, you can really do well and have great success with those things. A couple more things. He did say the timing was critical. So, I've always heard people saying, I'm going to season my cuts a day before, or let them sit in the refrigerator. Turns out that's not the right way to do it. The seasoning an hour before was what he suggested, and that's the first time I'd ever heard of that one. But what makes him show up and win a competition was those little details. It's knowing to do things a little bit differently. That's what got him on, it made him stand out to a judge. So he talked about, the moist meat versus the good cook. And that's what I think is such a big deal. So having that right approach, and Helen kind of mentioned that before as well with the one-way doors and things like that, knowing going in, your timing, what you're going to do, executing to your plan, like you said, Eamon, all those things lead to the success that you want to do. The more you understand about the process, the more success you'll have. You don't need to know every last detail, but if you understand what's going on and kind of the science behind it, like he was talking about, how meat breaks down, how it reabsorbs, you can then pivot. You can make the most out of your cloud journey. And I think, Eamon, to your point, the one thing that really stands out is what you can do with the cloud after the fact, after you're live. The innovations that come from these cloud providers, the updates, the shared experiences that are gained from all over the world and baked into the platform that you can then harness. They're so important to your journey, and that's what really stands us out in the business world. Each person here is trying to find a way to differentiate their company from others, and this gives you that ability to do that. Use the tools that are there and harness that energy that's coming in. Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely. I love the phrase learn your pit. Again, I'm going to use that in day-to-day work. But again, the analogy is very strong. Know your tools, know your platform, and then that experience starts to shine through, and as it did with Moe. And as you say, once you understand not just cloud or SAP, but understanding what does SAP and cloud actually mean, you can start to bring those little experience elements. I mean, one of the things I get a real kick out of in Lemongrass, and I always have done this, is when you see some really good, technically strong people, really capable people, and you get just to see them working, I get a real kick out of that. And it goes back to when I was a young SAP guy back in the day, and watching the SAP people, the guys who used to come from SAP, who were the developers of the product, when they were out working with customers, and you could see how effective and efficient they were, and how quickly they could navigate problems and get to the answer. I always find that kind of inspiring. And what I'm really proud of in Lemongrass is I look around and I see a lot of people like that in our company. People who've gone through the mill a number of times, have got that experience. Of course, and what we always like to say to customers, everybody here today, those are people that we like to bring into the mix whenever you've got a challenge, like we're talking about at the minute. So I think, Joe, any last words before we wrap up and hand back to Helen?
No, I think to Mo's point, and I think the biggest of the day is plan your work and then work your plan. Having a good partner to help you with this is absolutely a way to jumpstart this. Understanding your business goals, where you want to go, and then using the tools that are there to really maximize your journey. That's all part of it. It doesn't stop with the initiation in the cloud. There's so much more that comes with it, and there's so many opportunities there. And Eamon said it right. Have good people around that are smart, eager, and curious, and create all kinds of secret sauce and have some fun while you're doing it too.
Cool, thanks, Joe. Well, look, on behalf of Lemongrass, I want to say thanks to Moe, say thanks to Helen and the SUSE team for organising this, and then thanks to everybody here who's attended today. I hope everybody's learned something, and I hope we haven't ruined it with our analogies. And you get to take the barbecue packs and get to use them. And remember, when you need a good pitmaster for SAP on AWS, give us a call. So Helen, I'll hand back to you at this point, and if you want to wrap up, we'll say goodbye.
Thank you very much. I do see some questions, actually. So Stan just asked a question about what makes AWS a preferred cloud vendor for SAP. Jim, are you on? Would you like to answer that question? Jim is our North American partner executive for AWS. If you're speaking, you might be on mute.
Yeah, sorry, I was on mute. So I would say our 21-year partnership with AWS and SAP makes them, I would say, the ideal partner. The three of us are focused 24/7 on making sure that SAP is the best home, AWS is the best home for SAP, and SUSE complement, and the partnership complements each other quite well. We've done a lot of innovation together. You can find that in the quick starts, the launch wizards. We've done everything we can, I think, to help automate your deployment. It'd be a greenfield or be it a migration. And we've worked very closely with Lemongrass and all that as well.
Thanks, Jim. So Stan, I'd be happy to set up a follow-up call with you. There are a lot of really good technical reasons too that we can't get to in the next 3 minutes. So let me set up a quick call and then we can chat more about your question. So I think that wraps it up. I hope you had a very entertained and informed hour. We really appreciate your time. You are the best customers in the world. We are really fortunate to be working with people like you. And of course, we all want to win the green egg. So I will be doing the drawing shortly after I wrap this call, and you should be notified within 24 hours. Lemongrass is actually going to be the one shipping you the green egg directly. So I will connect you via email to the person who's going to be handling that. So with that, I will say adieu until our next event, be it virtual or in person. If you happen to be going to Las Vegas for reInvent, SUSE will be there. Look for our gold sponsorship booth. Take care. See you next time.
Thank you, everyone.